going on, y'all? Welcome back to OTB. It is hour number 3, OTB OT. And right now, it is time to talk a little NFL draft. Let's talk to Matt Miller at NFL Draft Scout on Twitter. One of the best of the entire game when it comes to breaking down the draft. And what a draft it'll be for so many teams around the league, given the current economic nature of the NFL and roster building. Matt, what's going on, man? Thank you so much for waking up with us this morning.
Yeah, of course, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
So let's just start there. Like, before we get into anything specific as far as the Saints or anybody else is concerned, how different is this year? Is there added emphasis throughout the league on the draft, just given, how kind of the middle class, because this lowered salary cap, is being squeezed out of it?
Yeah, guys, I think one thing we've seen over the last, maybe 8 or 9 years is that the draft has surpassed free agency in terms of league-wide importance because of the rookie wage scale. You want that quarterback on a rookie wage scale, whether that's a Dak Prescott and Russell Wilson outside of the first round, Derek Carr in the second round, or you have a Patrick Mahomes, a Justin Herbert. You have a young quarterback you want to build around 4 to 5 years of what we could call roster control, to steal a term from Major League Baseball. So I think we've seen the draft become maybe more important because of that. But I think the other side of it this year is with the cap being down and the cap being flat. Next year, what we're seeing is a lot of teams have needs that they haven't been able to fill via free agency, like we might see in a normal year, where the New Orleans Saints would head into free agency and say, okay, we need this, this, and this. Let's do it. This year, instead, we saw the Saints say, oh, okay, we got to get creative with our spending and our accounting, and we're going to have to lose to Trey Hendrickson, and we're going to have to lose some guys that we do like and that would normally be a building block type player. So I think that's where we're going to see the draft be important this year. Is for those teams, especially in the 20s and 30s of round one, that lost free agents and weren't able to pay someone to replace them. They got to now go out and draft really well.
And Matt, the comp picks for the Saints and other teams, but the Saints getting 2 third-round picks, that feels huge. So big for the Saints. And you feel like, gosh, you got to hit on those guys because, as you know, you draft a third-rounder, like you expect that guy to be, if not a starter, play a lot in his rookie season.
Yeah, I tell people that all the time. Round 1, you're a starter first year. Round 2, you're a contributor first year. Round 3, you're contributing, but you better be starting year 2. And right. I think that's one thing that where, Saints fans like, okay, Drew Brees retires, that's tough. You lose Trey Hendrickson, who I'm a huge fan of. That's why I keep bringing him up. But the good news is you have Mickey Loomis, who the 2017 New Orleans Saints draft is still the best draft class I've ever seen a team have. And they passed on Patrick Mahomes. Like, think about that. So, like, you're not passed on. You miss on the opportunity to get Patrick Mahomes. You pass on Deshaun Watson, and you still end up with the best draft class in modern draft history. So you have some guys down there who can evaluate talent. And I think for, I'm in Missouri. Chiefs fans are feeling the same thing right now of, you try to get Trent Williams, you can't. You can't close the deal because of money. You try to get Juju Smith-Schuster, you can't close the deal. And so it goes back to these GMs of playoff teams have to draft well, and in Tampa and Buffalo, they've been able to rework some contracts to keep their core group together. But for the Baltimores of the world, for the Pittsburgh Steelers, like they're going to have to go back to that root of being a good drafting team in order to stay on the top.
And so you have to draft well, Matt, and then whether it's through the draft or some other means, you have to find the quarterback. And so I want to get your opinion on quarterbacks because there's such a fascinating kind of tension to me between really feeling like you need a quarterback and then overdrafting a quarterback. Like, is there a fundamental flaw in runs on quarterbacks in the first round, or is it just the reality of the situation with how desperate you are to try to find these guys?
So I think it's both. I think there is a fundamental flaw. We can look at how many quarterbacks drafted in the last 10 years in the first round are still with their respective team. Not that many. And if Deshaun Watson, whatever happens in Houston, that might be one less. So I think there is a fundamental flaw of teams invent quarterback prospects to draft in the first round. E.J. Manuel, Paxton Lynch. We see teams reach for players instead of a Dak Prescott who lasts until the 5th round. Yeah. And so I do think that there is is Mac Jones a good player? Yes. Does Mac Jones deserve to be a top 7 or 8 pick in the NFL draft? I don't think so. And I think if you just stack your board, which is what I do, Mac Jones comes in somewhere in the 20s or 30s as a prospect, but he's probably going to be drafted in the top 10 because the importance of the position, the way rosters are constructed now with the rookie wage scale at the quarterback position, and because there aren't that many good quarterbacks out there. You know, I mean, in your guys' own backyard, you've got a team that is a Super Bowl contender with Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill at quarterback right now, which just goes to show, no disrespect to those two players, it's hard to find a good quarterback.
So obviously it's going to lead right into my next question. The Saints at 28. Some people thought maybe Matt could fall to them early in this draft process, but like you mentioned, I mean, a lot of draft boards, he's moved up because of the quarterback need. So do you think the Saints could go quarterback at 28? Is that too late to select a quarterback in this draft, or do you think there's some value there?
Yeah, I think it's too late, but like also too early, if that makes sense. So it's
right.
The sixth quarterback should not come off the board in the first round, whether that's Kyle Trask. I think it will be Kyle Trask of Florida. Davis Mills from Stanford has some heat right now. Kellen Mond at Texas A&M. Those are the next three quarterbacks off the board. That's way too early. So I think if the Saints, obviously they feel pretty good about the two guys they have, right, because they brought Jameis back. I don't think you bring Jameis back and restructure Taysom Hill to then trade for Sam Darnold. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like this is a team that will go into the draft, and you're hoping that Kellen Mond is there in round 3, maybe with one of those comp picks, and that you can maybe catch lightning in a bottle with a player who has really impressive physical traits, was a 4-year starter in the SEC. He's just been inconsistent. Sean Payton is pretty good at coaching up quarterbacks, so I think your hope would be the Saints might be one of those unique situations where you could take what we would call a draft and develop type quarterback. He doesn't have to play this year because of Jameis, because of Taysom, and then you go into 2022 hoping that year has allowed him to be the guy.
Talking to Matt Miller at NFL Draft Scout on Twitter, thedraftscout.com. You'll catch him all over the place during this time of year. When you look at the Saints' history, Matt, I feel like they've kind of bucked some trends in that, I don't know, I feel like the last few years, or maybe last decade or something, like accepted draft theory was something like the Patriots, right? A mass picks, throw a ton against the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
The Saints have consistently traded up. Is there an accepted best practice, or at the end of the day, whatever, you just got to do it right however you're doing it?
You know, I think it matters for the type of team you have. When you have a Drew Brees and you feel like you're close to a Super Bowl every year because you have Drew Brees, trading up for Marcus Davenport isn't that much of a risk because you're trying to fill that hole. You're trying to fill a need. I think we've seen teams like Seattle, when they went through the rebuild of the Legion of Boom, it was, let's get as many picks as possible. We want as many swings of the bat as we can get. The New England Patriots have done both. There was a couple years ago they had 4 picks in the entire draft. There have been other years like this year where they have 10. So I don't think there's an accepted best practice because it varies so much by how good is this actual draft class, because if it's a down year, if it's 2013, it doesn't really matter how many picks you have because the chances of getting quality players are down. But then also, how is your roster constructed? Do you have a great quarterback that you can win with? If so, it makes more sense. The Chiefs trade a first-round pick for Frank Clark. That puts them over the top. They win a Super Bowl. Every Chiefs fan in the world will tell you it was worth it. And so I think it just goes back to, what does your team look like? You know, the Miami Dolphins have a ton of picks and then won 10 games last year. That's a team that I would look at and flag and say they should be very, very active this year because they don't have a lot of needs, but they do have a lot of picks. And so that gives them some flexibility. Now, as far as trading up, they have the number 3 pick. There's not really anywhere up you can go from there, but they're still a team that could be really, really active on draft weekend.
And so speaking of activity, it looks like with the Sheldon Rankins signing that the Saints may get another compensatory pick in the 5th round this time, bring them to 8 total picks. Do you see them selecting all 8, or do you think they do make some deals to trade up somewhere in there?
Yeah, unfortunately, the Rankins signing, I don't think you'll get a comp pick on that one until next year.
Okay.
But
misread.
Yeah, so it's the next year. But I think it really matters, guys, where the quarterback line falls. If you can get ahead of New England at 15, then I think you have to try, right? If Mac Jones is there at 13, I think you have to try. If he's there at 14, I think you have to try. Now, getting either the Vikings or Chargers to trade back might be difficult because their needs at offensive tackle, but I think you at least have to try. Otherwise, I would say this is a year to sit tight and see what happens at 28. It might even be a good year to move from 28 to 34, 35, right. Gain those extra picks because the difference in players this year, it's a good draft. It's not a great draft. So the player at 28 and the player at 35 probably aren't going to be that different this year in terms of how you have valued them in your pre-draft reports. So I think this could be a smart year to accumulate more of those 2, 3, 4 round picks, low-cost players who, like we were saying earlier, can still be impacts in year 1.
All right, Matt, obviously being here in Baton Rouge, let's talk some LSU Tigers. Their pro day coming up in a couple of days. We'll get a chance to see some guys, Jamar Chase and Shelvin, that we have not seen in almost a year. So I know a lot of people are going to focus on them. You got Terrace Marshall, who's a very interesting prospect as well. What are the things you're going to be watching during LSU's Pro Day?
Yeah, I mean, it'd just be fun to see Jamar Chase move again. It's been a while, right? And
yes.
I think, Hester, something you and I talked about a while back was people have just forgotten how great this guy is, and they will remember soon enough. Thankfully, that happened before the Pro Day came around. But if we get a 40 time on Jamar Chase, that's going to be huge. I'm fighting that fight on Twitter once a week when people say that he's slow, and I have to be like, he's not slow. Trust me. Turn on the Florida tape. He's not slow. Watch him accelerate past these dudes.
Yeah.
We've seen him in the SEC for 2 years. We know how fast he is. With Terrace Marshall, I think it's all the same. What does the athletic profile look like? Because a good enough athletic profile could get him on the board as the 4th receiver drafted, the 5th receiver drafted. So those are the things that you're looking at, in terms of just the 3-cone time, the 40 time, the vert time, just all those things. Let's compare you as probably the best big receiver in the draft outside of Jamar Chase. Because Rashad Bateman, we've seen his pro day. He also didn't play much this past year. He was an opt-out guy midway through the season. So you're competing with Elijah Moore from Ole Miss, Kadarius Toney from Florida, smaller receivers. So if Terrace puts a good time out there, that could push him up the board. And then I think with your guys on defense, where does Kerry Vincent Jr. fit in? I know a lot of teams see him as a slot corner type player who is more of a hybrid safety / corner. And then Jacoby Stevens, I know he's resisted playing linebacker, and then we saw him do it at the Senior Bowl. So being able to see him in position drills, what does he do? Does he work out at safety? Does he work out at linebacker? Does he do a little bit of both? Those are the things that you really want to see at a pro day.
Well, and so I'm going to ask you about another specific one, Matt, and it almost feels a bit random at this point just because of how everything's gone. You mentioned not seeing Jamar Chase in forever. We haven't seen Tyler Shelvin in forever, who was a key piece of that D-line for that national championship LSU team. Now, at least here locally, there's always been concerns about his weight and stuff, so certainly not playing last year kind of seemed to exacerbate some of those concerns outside looking in. What's the latest word on Shelvin?
Yeah, I know teams that have a round 2 grade on him. So the difference is round two film grade doesn't always mean you'll be drafted in round 2, but a round 2 film grade in a weak defensive line class. The key this year will be a guy who didn't play. What is your connection like to the university, and what does the university say about him? Is the coaching staff there going to say, hey, we believe in Tyler. He's a little bit young, a little bit raw, but we believe in him. He's going to be a starter in the NFL for you. That is the key, because this year more than ever, scouts have not been able to go in and visit with these players. So there's a lack of information about the person, which is huge, because not to compare them, but we're seeing the Isaiah Wilson saga play out. First-round pick, traded for a swap of a 7th. Now he's been cut. So things like that echo how important it is to make sure we get good character grades on players. And like you said with Tyler Shelvin, there's nothing in an arrest record or a report like that. But what there are is concerns of weight, and that speaks to maturity, conditioning, love of the game, all those things, Hester, that you and I have talked about for years.
Right.
And that's, I think, the biggest part of the profile for Tyler Shelvin will be what does that look like, and what does the university say about him? Because that is such a huge part of who you are as a prospect, is what your coaches are going to say about you. And
cut off there a little bit at the end, Matt, but that is okay. We've already taken up enough of your time. Matt Miller, ESPN NFL Draft Analyst at DraftScout.com, at NFL Draft Scout. Matt, thank you so much, dude. This was awesome. Hopefully we can do it again before the draft. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Matt.
All right,
appreciate
take it easy, Matt. Damn, Matt knows his stuff, man. He's got that on lock. You could ask him about anybody.
It's funny, like how our friendship started. I was playing for the Broncos, and we were in a playoff game, and Trendon returned a kickoff for a touchdown, and I didn't hold, but on the TV copy, I guess it looked like I did. And Matt tagged me. He's like, stop holding out there, Hester, or something like that, like as a joke. And then so I shot him a message back, and kind of went back and forth, had some fun with it. And so that was way back, I guess, in 2013.
It wasn't the Ravens game, was it?
Yeah, it was the Ravens game. So that was 2013. And so that's how, we became friends. And he is a grinder. He has climbed the ladder. He was with Bleacher Report for a long time. He's now gone off on his own with the NFLDraftScout.com. Now he is part of ESPN's draft coverage. So, man, he has worked his way to the top.
Yeah, he's got like over 250,000 followers on Twitter. So if you're looking for a great draft follow, go ahead and follow Matt Miller, NFL Draft Scout. All right, when we get back, more OTB OT. Keep it locked right here.